The movie opens with Andrew, who wakes up late one morning, not naked like me, but definitely late for work. He rushes out, trying to reach the office before his boss arrives. On the way, he bumps into a peon named Kalu, and coffee spills all over his shirt. Furious, Andrew orders Kalu to take off his shirt immediately or risk losing his job, and poor Kalu, terrified, obeys. Just then, Andrew's boss, Margaret, walks in, the woman whose very name makes the entire office tremble. She's the chief editor of a major US-based publishing company, known for her strict, no-nonsense behavior. She drags Andrew to the marketing department, where she immediately fires an employee named Bob for his poor performance. Because, according to her, Bob's marketing skills were as bad as the air quality in Delhi. Right after Bob storms off, Margaret receives a call from her own boss. He informs her that her US visa extension has been rejected, and she'll have to return to Canada immediately. The news leaves her stunned. If she's forced to leave, she'll lose her job and everything she's worked for. But Margaret isn't one to give up easily. When Andrew walks in, she suddenly comes up with a wild idea. Turning to her boss, she confidently declares that she won't be leaving the country because she's about to marry her boyfriend, Andrew. That way, she'll become a permanent US citizen. The boss, though clearly skeptical and jealous, reluctantly agrees to let her stay if the marriage is legitimate. Soon, the entire office finds out about the supposed engagement, and everyone starts teasing Andrew. The poor guy has no clue what just happened. Stunned and angry, he confronts Margaret, asking, "What the hell are you doing?" But she coldly reminds him that he's her secretary, and if he wants to keep his job and maybe earn a promotion, he'll play along. Before he can protest, she drags him straight to the immigration office to make their fake marriage official. However, the immigration officer, already tipped off by Bob, is suspicious. He warns them that their case will go through a full investigation, they'll be questioned separately, their phone records will be checked, their families contacted, and if the marriage turns out to be fake, Margaret will be deported permanently, while Andrew faces a $250,000 fine and 5 years in jail. Hearing that, Andrew nearly faints. Thinking fast, he tells the officer they'll do the interview later since they're traveling to Alaska the next day for his grandmother's birthday. The officer agrees, letting them go for now. Outside, Andrew explodes in frustration, accusing Margaret of ruining his life for her selfish reasons. But she quickly kneels down, not to apologize, but to propose for real, right there in public, just to calm him down. She promises that if he helps her, she'll make him the new editor of the company. Tempted by the offer, Andrew reluctantly agrees. The next morning, the two board a flight to Alaska. On the plane, Andrew reminds her that he's been her secretary for 3 years, so he knows everything about her. Skeptical, Margaret challenges him until he mentions the small tattoo she has in a very private place, leaving her speechless. When they land, they're greeted by Andrew's mother, Grace, and his sweet yet sharp-witted grandmother, Annie. On the drive home, Margaret notices that every shop in town carries Andrew's last name and realizes that the man she thought was just a broke assistant is actually from a wealthy, influential family. Soon, they arrive at the family's grand estate in Alaska, where the real drama and unexpected romance begin. As the story continues, Margaret and Andrew set out for Andrew's family estate in Alaska, a place they could only reach by boat. During the ride, Andrew helped Margaret every step of the way, showing an unexpected sense of care and responsibility. When they finally arrived, the grand house was buzzing with excitement. A celebration had been arranged to welcome Andrew home. Well, that's rich people for you. Any excuse for a party? During the festivities, Margaret, a bit astonished, asked Andrew why he never told her he was so wealthy. Andrew smirked and replied, "I never said I was poor either." Classic Sigma move, mysterious and confident. However, Andrew's father, Joe Paxton, didn't seem too thrilled to meet Margaret. He clearly disapproved of his son's involvement with his boss and soon pulled Andrew aside. It was then revealed that Joe wanted Andrew to take over the family business, but Andrew had always been more passionate about publishing and writing, his true calling. Their argument heated up, and in frustration, Andrew declared in front of everyone that he and Margaret were getting married soon. The room burst into cheers, forcing the two to seal their fake engagement with a kiss, one that left them both surprisingly shaken. They didn't know what to feel, but something definitely shifted between them. Later that night, Andrew's mother, Grace, and grandmother, Annie, arranged for the couple to share a room. Wanting to be a gentleman, Andrew set up his bed on the floor, refusing to let Margaret sleep uncomfortably. The next morning, Margaret stepped outside, only to find Andrew waiting for her. He reminded her that she was supposed to go shopping that day with his mother and grandmother. As they looked over, both women were already watching them closely, so Andrew playfully hugged Margaret to keep up appearances, earning approving smiles from the elders. Afterward, Andrew went to see his father, but Joe once again started lecturing him about joining the family business, which only made Andrew angrier. Meanwhile, Grace and Annie took Margaret out to a local bar, where they met a half-naked, overly enthusiastic dancer performing on stage. In the middle of all the chaos, Margaret was dragged into the fun and reluctantly joined the wild dancing, much to everyone's amusement. Soon, Andrew's ex-girlfriend Gertrude approached her and politely congratulated her on the engagement. She explained that she and Andrew had once been together, though when she refused to leave town with him, their relationship fell apart. Hearing this, Margaret quietly wondered if perhaps Gertrude was the one truly meant for Andrew, though deep down, she wasn't so sure anymore. When Margaret and the others returned home, she found Andrew furiously chopping wood outside, clearly upset. Grace realized that Joe must have gotten under his skin again about the family business, and she scolded her husband for it. Margaret overheard the conversation, and later that night, gently asked Andrew about his father. Andrew refused to talk about it, saying he didn't want to reopen old wounds. That's when Margaret opened up instead, revealing that she'd lost her parents as a child, and that her strict, hardened personality was just a way of protecting herself from the loneliness she'd carried all her life. Talking softly, they both drifted off to sleep together, not as boss and employee, but as two lonely souls finally finding a bit of peace. The next morning, Margaret woke to a knock at the door. It was Grace, who came in with Annie and Joe. They joyfully announced that the wedding would take place the very next day. The couple was stunned, but Annie emotionally added, "I'm getting older. I may not live long enough to see a grandchild, but at least let me see my grandson's wedding." Well, how do you argue with that? The elderly always know how to hit you right in the heart. Now, with the wedding set, Margaret and Andrew started preparing. Andrew was anxious, but Margaret tried to calm him down, giving him a gentle massage and even serving him tea, though his mind clearly wasn't on tea at all. Later, Grace and Annie took Margaret shopping for her bridal gown. After finding the perfect dress, they gave her a family heirloom locket, passed down for generations. The gesture moved Margaret deeply. It was the first time she'd felt genuine love and acceptance from a family. Overwhelmed with emotion, she left the store and rushed straight to Andrew, who was steering a speedboat at the time. Fighting back tears, she told him, "Your family is so kind, I can't lie to them anymore." Alarmed by her tone, Andrew quickly took control of the wheel, afraid she might crash in her emotional state. And just in time too, because the boat nearly collided before he managed to steer it safely away. After the near accident on the boat, Margaret suddenly lost her balance and fell straight into the water. Without a second thought, Andrew dove in to save her. Pulling her back into the boat, he tried to warm her up, casually, but with real concern in his eyes. Just then, Andrew's father called, summoning them back home. And as they arrived, they were shocked to find the immigration officer, Mr. Gilbertson, waiting there. He had tracked them all the way to Alaska, determined to expose their fake marriage plan. When he began interrogating the family, Andrew snapped. In anger, he said, "Listen, pal, she's been my boss for 3 years and my girlfriend for 6 months. Tomorrow, when we get married, feel free to stay for the free food." Furious but confident, Andrew walked away with Margaret, leaving everyone stunned. That night, neither of them could sleep. Andrew realized that what he'd said in anger, he actually meant from the heart. Somewhere along the way, he had truly fallen in love with Margaret. The next morning, their wedding day arrived. The house was beautifully decorated, and everyone, Andrew's parents, grandmother, and friends, waited eagerly. But as Margaret looked around at the happy, loving family, her heart sank. She couldn't lie to such kind people. Just before the ceremony began, she stepped forward and confessed everything. That the marriage was fake, that Andrew was only helping her to avoid deportation, and that she'd promised to make him the editor in return. Her honesty stunned everyone. Mr. Frund, Mr. Offa, Gilbertson, clearly pleased to have caught them, smirked triumphantly. But Annie and Grace were devastated. They had already accepted Margaret as one of their own. As the room filled with silence, Andrew tried to calm everyone down, but when he turned around, Margaret was gone. She had left a letter behind for him, though not really about liking and subscribing, of course. It was her way of saying goodbye. She wrote that she couldn't face him or his family after all she'd done, and that she was returning to Canada. Meanwhile, the immigration officer escorted Margaret away, giving her 24 hours to pack her things and leave the country. Andrew wanted to go after her immediately, but his father stopped him, saying, "Let her go, son. Focus on the family business." But before their argument could continue, Annie suddenly collapsed, clutching her chest. She had suffered a heart attack. In a panic, the family rushed her onto a plane to get her to the hospital. Inside the plane, Annie removed her oxygen mask for a moment and, in her faint but determined voice, said 2 things. First, that Jill must stop forcing the family business on Andrew. And second, that Andrew must learn to cherish his family and the people who truly care for him. Andrew promised her that he would. Satisfied, Annie suddenly sat up, perfectly fine, revealing that her heart attack was just an act, a clever ruse to reunite her grandson with the woman he loved. "Now," she said with a grin, "let's head to the airport. We've got a bride to stop." By the time they arrived at the airport, Margaret had already boarded her flight. The next morning, she was back at her office, quietly packing up her things, preparing to resign and leave everything behind. But suddenly, the door burst open. It was Andrew, breathless, exhausted, but determined. He had chased her all the way there. Looking straight into her eyes, he confessed his feelings, not out of obligation, but love. "You're my partner," he said, "not just in work, but in life." Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes as she realized that this time, everything was real. She said yes. Yes to love, to honesty, to a new beginning. And as for the immigration officer, Well, this time, both Andrew and Margaret were fully prepared. When called in for questioning, they answered every single question perfectly. They knew each other inside and out now, no lies, no pretense, just truth and love. And that's how their story, filled with humor, emotion, and unexpected love, finally found its beautiful ending. Now, friends, tell me, what did you think of this heartwarming story? If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. Let's reach 1,000 likes for Andrew and Margaret's unforgettable journey. Share your favorite moment in the comments. Was it their hilarious fake proposal, the emotional confession, or that epic airport reunion? I'd love to hear your experience watching this one. And until next time, stay happy, stay inspired, and never stop believing in love. NDS.